Hi guys, welcome back to the Do It Yourself YouTube channel. And I'm sure you've guessed from the title of the video that this week we're heading back to plumbing tips. And much like I did a few months back in a previous video where I show you how to solder Yorkshire fittings, this time around I'm going to show you end feed and how, as a beginner, you can make a start soldering end feed fittings onto copper pipe. And hopefully you'll be able to avoid making some of the same mistakes that I did when I first started soldering. And if you want to give Yorkshire fittings a try, because they are a little bit easier, then give this link that I'll put on the screen a click, come up somewhere, and there you'll be able to learn a slightly easier method. But if you're up for giving this one a shot, then stick with me and let's make a start. Oh, and before I forget, make sure you're subscribed, because when it gets to the end of this video you're going to forget all about it. You're just going to click off here and you won't remember. So make sure you're subscribed now, because there's going to be loads of plumbing, electrical, construction tips and tricks on this channel going forward, and there's bound to be something that's going to help you out. So if you're a subscriber, you'll know that on my channel I like to run through all the bits you're going to need for the job. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's bring you in a little bit closer. Right, so what do we need for this one? First of all, a length or two of copper pipe. 15mm or 22mm, whichever you need for the appropriate job. And you'll need a couple of end feed copper fittings. Again, the ones that you need will vary job to job. You might need equal T's, you might need elbows, you might need straight couplings, the list goes on. You'll want a reel of lead-free plumbing solder. You're going to want some wire wool to clean your copper pipe up, and maybe a scotch pad too. Grab yourself a deburring tool. These are really handy little bits of kit. I'll stick a link to the one I like to use in the description below. Go grab yourself one. They're really good bits of kit. Probably going to want a tape measure. You're also going to want some self-cleaning flux. You'll want a pipe cutter like this. There's loads of these on the market. Again, I'll stick a link in the description below so you can grab yourself one. And you're not going to get very far at all without a blow lamp. Again, there's loads of different ones on the market. This one's really good. There is a review on my channel already to this blow lamp, so if you like the look of it, click the little link somewhere at the top of the screen and that'll take you to that review, and you can make an informed decision on whether you want to go grab yourself one of these. I was then cracking on, and I forgot to mention you're going to want a heat-proof mat. They're pretty cheap, but I tell you what, they're worth every penny. Right guys, so first of all, before we even go lighting a blow lamp, we need to prepare some copper pipe. It's like any other job. If you don't get the prep spot on, you're going to fail from the start. So I'll run through exactly what you need to do to get this copper pipe prepped and ready to put some heat into. Cut off the length of copper pipe that you need for the job at hand. Chop off the length that you need. There's normally a little arrow on these so you can see what way to turn them. Like that. Now it's worth noting, when the pipe comes from the manufacturer, you'll see that the pipe has quite a square end on it. Make sure you don't use that edge from the factory. Now I'll show you this next stage on an older piece of copper pipe, because over time they do oxidize, and it doesn't take very long for them to oxidize either. And whenever we're soldering onto copper pipe, whether it be a new piece of copper pipe or a slightly older bit, we still need to clean up the ends that we plan on soldering. So grab yourself some wire wool and just clean up the end of that pipe, and you'll see already the difference. Do the same on our new piece, just like that. Now we have two nice clean ends to join together. Right, the next thing we're going to do to prepare our pipe is use a deburring tool. As I said at the start, I'll put links to these tools in the description. You'll see in the middle of this deburring tool there's like a spike, and what that does is takes off any of the sharp, uneven bits on the inside of that pipe. Any burrs in there, not only do they cause decreased water flow, but they can cause a disturbance in the flow of water, and that may mean that you'll be able to hear a whishing or whistling sound as the water passes through that fitting. So it's quite important that you don't have any little snags in there. So just a few turns, you don't need to go mad, and you'll see that that has made the inside of that pipe nice and smooth. And now give it a couple of turns on the inside of the deburrer. That will help to take any snags off the exterior of the pipe too. One thing not to forget is to give the fitting a clean as well. Now you can use wire wool on the inside of these, or you can use a little corner off one of these little scotch pads. I quite like to just give them a little clean on the inside of that. Right guys, flux application next. I'm using this self-cleaning flux. Just give the pipe a little coating of that where the fitting's going to go on the end. Okay, just a thin coat like that. This flux I'm using is pretty handy because it comes with a little brush. Some of these they don't, and you'll need to use a little paintbrush to apply that on the end. Now just do the same with the fitting as well. Just run the brush round on the inside of the fitting, just like that. Get a fine coat of flux on the inside of that fitting. Now place the fitting on the end of the copper pipe, push it all the way home, and do the same on the other piece of copper pipe as well. Now it's important to note when you're doing this not to overdo it. The reason for that is if you leave lots of flux hanging around, not only does it oxidize and go horrible, but it can actually become a corrosive. So don't overdo it with the flux. Now place this into the other end of your fitting and push that all the way home. Right, so before we start applying any heat, there's a couple of little tips here. First of all, because I'm not going to have much time to really explain this to you, when we apply the solder, we're going to apply it just at the end of the pipe here. Okay, so not up here and not down here, but right in that joint there. Okay, now what we want to do is heat up the bottom of the fitting. The reason for that is heat travels upwards quite quickly on copper. So if we just heat the top of the pipe up, what will happen is the solder will melt nicely in the top, but it won't actually run and travel into the bottom of the pipe because that will be somewhat colder. So we need to heat up the bottom of this pipe. Now, capillary reaction will drag the solder all the way into this fitting and all the way around, provided we've got it hot enough in the correct spot. So I heat up the bottom area of the pipe gradually, and then I just apply a small amount of solder, which will be sucked inward into our joint, creating a perfect seal. Another little trick with your solder is to bend an amount the same diameter as the pipe. So you can see there I've bent the same amount as the diameter of my pipe. Up to that bend there, that should be the correct amount of solder to fill that joint. That way you're not going to get excessive amounts of solder in the joint. So making a little bend like that, the same diameter as this 15mm pipe, that will help a beginner to avoid applying too much solder. Now if we try and solder this as it is, what will happen when we heat up the flux in this joint, this piece of pipe here will end up just falling down or falling off like that. So there's a couple of little tricks to actually stop that from happening. The first one, the tape measure trick. From the floor, pull off enough of the tape measure and lock the tape measure in place, and actually have your tape measure hold the pipe in place for you whilst you solder. There's one more little trick. The second little trick, grab a pair of grips and just give the pipe a gentle squeeze, and that has now nipped that copper in place just enough to hold that steady whilst we go soldering. Right guys, now the fun bit. Let's do some soldering. But let me stress, if you're a beginner, this is not about getting it particularly neat. It's about A, getting some solder in there, enough to do the job, B, not making a complete mess of it, and C, and probably the most important, don't set fire to anything. Right, it's going to be hard to hear me when I do this, but just watch what I'm doing. I'm going to warm that fitting up. Like I said before, I'm going to heat up at the bottom here and in the middle of the fitting, not out here at the edge. That way, because of the capillary action, the solder will be drawn not only into the fitting, but also upward because of the heat too. So we're just going to warm around the middle bottom of that fitting. So just watch, because it's going to be really hard to hear me. There you go, that is as quick as it happens, and you can see there that we've got that nice seal all the way around. There's plenty of solder in there, and we used that prescribed amount that we measured off first, so we didn't over solder. For some of you, the copper may not heat up quite that quickly. That will depend on a few variables. So what I like to do is just let the joint cool down and then come in afterwards and give that a clean up. Whatever you do, don't go dipping this in water or spraying it or trying to cool it down in any way. Because of the extreme temperature change, that can actually crack the solder joint that you've just made. So that's the last thing you want to go and do. So be patient, let it cool down, don't burn your hands on it. Just grab your cloth, give it all a bit of a wipe over, because we want to wipe off any of that excess flux that's hanging around on the pipe. Now, like I said, flux over time not only goes green and looks horrible, but can in some cases be corrosive. So wipe all that off the pipe and give it a good clean up with a wire wool. Now that will remove any heat marking on the pipe, also any of that excess flux, and just make it all look a lot prettier in general. And you can see, look how nice and clean and shiny that's come up. Your mates ain't gonna laugh at you for that, are they? So if you look around the pipe there, you can actually see, look, where you can see the solders run all the way around the pipe. No overly big blobs. You know, I'm not saying my soldering's the best by any means, but there is complete coverage there with the solder. So that is what you're aiming for. And to be honest guys, that only comes with practice. So grab some copper pipe and some solder, give this job a go. Right guys, before you head off, check out this link above somewhere. I can never tell what side I'm going to put the link on. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because there's loads more content like this coming up, and there's bound to be something that will help you out in the future. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure you give me a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.